Good morning. Good morning and welcome to First Unitarian Universalist Church of Nashville. My name is Jay Tiefenbrunn and I'm very pleased to be your Director of Music Ministries. I'd like to invite you to join in the singing this morning with hymn number 217, Oh Sing Hallelujah, number 217 in the gray hymnal. Please rise in body or in spirit as you're so moved and join in the singing. Oh, sing hallelujah, oh, sing hallelujah. All praise be to you through the high arch of the heavens, and praise be the sun, moon, stars, by trumpet, harp, and lute, with cymbals and strings and flute, with dancing, singing, and music we praise you. Sing hallelujah. Trumpet, harp, and lute, with cymbals and strings and flute, with dancing, singing, and music we praise you. Sing hallelujah, oh sing hallelujah, oh sing hallelujah. Our Father and Mother and Sovereign of all mercies, inscribe on us pages of life, by trumpet, harp, and lute, with cymbals and strings and flute, with dancing, singing, and music we praise you. Sing hallelujah. Our second song this morning is number 219, Oh Hear My People, number 219. Hear my people, hear me well. I have no need for sacrifice, but mercy, loving kindness shall alone for life and good suffice. Then source of peace, lead us to peace, a place profound and wholly true, and lead life. Oh, source of peace, lead us to heal. Oh, source of peace, lead us from strife. And our third song this morning is number 280, number 280, Hallelujah, number 280. Don't be alarmed or put off by the Hebrew, just do the best that you can. Welcome. Please take a moment and greet your neighbors.
We seek our place in the world and the answers to our heart's deep questions. As we seek, may our hearts be open to unexpected answers. May the light of our chalice remind us that this is a community of warmth, of wisdom, and welcoming of multiple truths.
Today we celebrate the Jewish New Year, a 10-day holiday, holy days, that started with Rosh Hashanah at sundown last Sunday and closes this coming Wednesday with Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Let us join our hearts and minds in the spirit of worship with this Atonement Day reading by Chaim Stern. And before I read it, I'd like to say that we will not be doing the Joys and Concerns ceremony that we often do during the service, because we're going to be doing a different ceremony called Tashlich, which we do. It means the casting away. It's a Jewish folk tradition for this time of the year. And if you want to light candles or let the lay ministry team know of your joys and concerns, it's set up on the back table as always, and our lay ministry team will pick up your slips at the end of the day so we can respond. Okay. Now let's join our hearts in the spirit of worship. Once more, Atonement Day has come. All pretense gone, naked heart revealed to the hiding self. We stand on holy ground between the day that was and the one that must be. We tremble. At what did we aim? How did we stumble? What did we take? What did we give? To what were we blind? Last year's confession came easily to the lips. Will this year's come from deeper than the skin? Say then, why are our paths strewn with promises like fallen leaves? Say then, when shall our lust be our wisdom? Say now, love and truth shall meet, justice and peace shall embrace. once upon a time, a long, long, long time ago, there was a little boy named Samuel who was growing up in a shrine to the God of their people, Yahweh. He was being brought up by Eli, who was the priest there. But the priest had two of his own sons who were already grown up. And the way they did it was they just passed on the priesthood to their sons. So those sons were going to become the next priests. But they were really mean. People would come to them to pray and to make offerings, and those grown sons would bully them. They would take the offerings for their self, and they were abusing the people. Now, in those days, the Yahweh was not known to speak to the people in their dreams or in their visions. But one of the elders of the tribe came to Eli one day, and he said, I heard Yahweh speak, and he told me that your sons are abusing the people, and that you have to stop them, or God is going to have to judge your family. Now, Eli knew that his sons were abusing the people, but he did nothing about it. So, over the years, Samuel was growing up. He was taking on more responsibilities, and Eli was getting older and older, and his sons continued to be abusive. Well, one night, and this is when Samuel is almost a young man now, he must be 13 or 14, and he is taking on more responsibility. So at night, what he does is he sleeps in what they call the sanctuary. And in the sanctuary is the Ark of the Covenant, which is where the 10 Commandments were kept. So that's the promises they made with God and with the people to treat each other fairly. And he sleeps in there mostly because they have oil lamps like this in there, and they keep them burning. So it's safe to have somebody in there in case something happens to the oil lamps and you don't want things to catch on fire. And meanwhile, Eli goes to bed really early now. He's really old and his eyesight is fading. So as soon as it gets dusk, he goes to bed because he really can't see anything at the nighttime. So that night, Samuel is just resting. It's not really bedtime yet. And all of a sudden he hears somebody calling him, Samuel, Samuel. And he jumps up and he runs into Eli's room and he says, I'm here, you called me. And Samuel says, I didn't call you. I didn't call you, go back. You're supposed to be in the sanctuary. What are you doing here? So he goes back, he's a little confused. He goes back and he kind of relaxes and rests for a minute. And then he hears again, Samuel, Samuel. He looks around, there's nobody there. He runs into the room to see Eli. He says, I'm here, you called me. He says, no, I'm not calling you. He goes and Eli doesn't know what else to do. I'm here, you called me. Well, this time Eli says, I've been thinking about this. It's obviously not me who's calling you. So it's probably Yahweh. He's thinking about that man who came to him and told him that Yahweh spoke to him. So he says, why don't you go back, and if he calls you again, just say, speak Yahweh, your servant is listening. So he's kind of grateful for some guidance because he's a little confused. So he goes back, and sure enough, was that somebody was standing right next to him. He hears, Samuel, Samuel. He says, okay, what am I supposed to say? Oh yes, speak Yahweh, your servant is listening. And Yahweh says, Eli's sons are abusing the people, and Eli isn't stopping them. And I must pass judgment on them. Their family will wither away like leaves falling from the trees. And a new priest shall serve the people and serve me. Well, the next morning, Eli says, what did Yahweh say? And he tells him. It's a harsh words, but he tells him. And he continues continues to serve the people, and the people learn to love him because he is kind to them, and he keeps covenant with them and with Yahweh. And Eli, as he fades away in old age, his whole family withers, and Samuel becomes the priest and carries on. So this is the end of my story, and now we're going to sing you to church school from the inside back cover of the Great Hymn.
And those joining us online to worship this morning. In order to reach a wider community than those able to be physically present on Sunday morning, our services are live streamed on YouTube and Facebook. Before I continue, let me remind you to silence your cell phones. As Unitarian Universalists, our spiritual paths vary, but in this congregation we have made a covenant together. We affirm our interdependence, we celebrate our differences, and we work for justice. We deepen our relationships as we create a compassionate, welcoming community, nurture spiritual growth, and act on our values in a broader world. I want to extend a special welcome to visitors worshiping with us this morning. We ask you to wear the paper name tags because it helps us recognize you as someone we'd like to meet. If you're seeking a spiritual home, we hope that you may find it here. Whether you are new to Unitarian Universalism or visiting from another UU congregation, we invite you to stop by the welcome table after the service to have questions answered. People become members of this congregation by signing the membership book and supporting the church with their time and finances. If you are considering joining the church, please talk to our minister today, Reverend Gail Sevi, who is sitting right here in the front and who you'll see in a moment. Following the service, we hope everyone will enjoy coffee and fellowship in the social area, where you will also find information about current opportunities for engagement and reflection. There are a number of announcements in the weekly bulletin, which I hope you'll take home and read, and I have one additional a reminder that today is the last day to sign up for the Habitat Build, which is next Sunday. So if you want to sign up, see the table out in the social area. And then I'd like to introduce Roddy Biggs, who will be joining us for a moment with a blanking on the stewardship moment. I'm blanking on the word, sorry.
Like Gloria said, my name is Roddy Biggs. I came out as gay at the age of 12 and was bullied for several years. And like many, I turned to religion to help, only to find that I was not welcome in my former faith. I learned very quickly that being a member of that faith meant hiding who I was from those around me, acting like something I was not, and pretending that I was straight. So I suddenly felt unloved, unimportant, and hurt by the very faith that I had once loved so much. I eventually stopped attending church altogether and explored spirituality and religion on my own for years. So after quite some time of not attending church, I woke up on the morning of January 1st, 2017, after turmoil with US politics, turmoil in myself, and attended church for the first time in years. So that church was the Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church in Knoxville. On my first Sunday walking into that church, I felt a sense of love, acceptance, and welcome that I have not felt in years. I knew there I would be welcomed for who I was, that I would not need to hide who I was, and that I did belong. So 12 weeks ago, I stepped foot in this church for the first time. That same feeling of love and acceptance is what I felt and what my partner felt when we stepped in this church. So, you all are doing what you need to do. Keep that up. A couple of weeks ago, I started classes at Middle Tennessee State University, where I am taking religious studies courses, and I have answered a call to ordain ministry with the UUA. So seminary is in my future. Now I know what you might be saying. That's great, wonderful. What's that have to do with me and First UU Nashville? The answer is pretty simple. By doing what you're doing, by giving of your time as you are able, your money as you are able, and helping to uplift and empower the community and those around us, we are building a community of love, of justice, and we are living out our values. So please dig deep, reflect, and think on what you are able to do, what you are able to give, whether it is your time or your money, and support our beloved church community, because together we can and we will be the light of change our world so desperately needs. Thank you.
And now our offering will be received. Those of you who want to use online media to do your offering, the directions are in your order of service. This month, we're sharing the plate with Room in the Inn, which we're involved with. We join many congregations, hundreds literally, in this city to put up in the winter people who are homeless. And this month, we raise money for our part of that, and next month, we'll ask you to sign up to help. So thank you so much for your ongoing generosity.
Good morning. My name is Rachel Rogers. I'm a member of this congregation. I'm also your worship associate for this morning's service. And I want to open my reflection by asking you all to imagine a scenario that I think most of us are familiar with. So it's inevitable. You're at a party, a dinner, or some other social event with a group that includes some folks you know and others you're only meeting for the first time. You're sailing along fine, catching up with people, telling a good joke or two. You're feeling confident, even relaxed. And then you get the question. So what do? It's the worst. This question, while understandably a staple of small talk everywhere, it assumes a lot of things. It assumes that what I do know is true for many is true for everyone. And that's that the answer to that question is an exciting one that even brings on a sense of pride. There are people who love what they do, meaning they love their job. They've discovered they have a vocation that allows them to earn their keep, doing a thing that gives them joy and gives them a sense of purpose. Not only did they discover that thing, they also had the means to actually do that thing. And to take it a step further, they're proud of what they do. But as I mentioned before, the question, what do you do, either assumes that we all feel that way, or the asker is truly ready to plunge the interviewee into a small-scale existential crisis. I'm not truly of the belief that we all want to indiscriminately cause such pain to people we've just met. But I also, to be honest, am one of those people that sighs to the point of near deflation when someone asks me this question. I have what I consider to be a very good job, a career even. But when you ask me what I do, you're asking me to distill myself into this single descriptor of the thing I do quite literally for money, which puts me in the position of introducing you to only a part of me. Not to mention a part of me that can often feel disconnected from my core. So while you'll hear me say, I work in corporate communications, what I'm thinking is, don't identify with me with this thing that isn't me. Also, consider those among us who do not work in the conventional sense, meaning their labor in this world is unpaid. Perhaps they are caregivers. Perhaps their energy is best spent not in the workplace, but in the pursuit of healing their bodies, their mind, or their spirit. How easy is it for us to forget that the traditional narrative of career, vocation, or even calling may not be a part of everyone's life, whether that's temporary or permanent. We need to make room for all people and for all the parts that make up each and every one of us. In this age of social media, many of us have taken on the task of writing mini biographies for our various profiles, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, etc. Often these bios are limited to 140 characters. If you've ever tried putting one together, you may recognize the pressure of describing yourself in just a few words while being accurate but also not sounding full of yourself. Personally, after what is surely entirely too much thought, I tend to just go with a string of emoji characters. So currently, Instagram identifies me as 2 ladies and a baby, tiny plant, waning moon, rainbow, crystal ball, sparkles, and information desk person, which is my favorite emoji. Which, to be honest, I find to be much more an accurate description of my life than the answer to the question, what do you do? So when I started putting these thoughts down, I planned for the point of this reflection to be a battle cry for the end of the dreaded question. The truth is, though, that the question isn't going away, even if a room full of people decide to try and elevate the small talk just beyond it at their next dinner party. So instead, I'm considering what my answer should be the next time I'm asked. Because it's not that I don't identify at all with my job. My job happens to be all about making sure that I get the necessary information across to people that people need in order to be successful in their own work. It's not a bad gig. Do I wish I was maybe doing something else? Sure, but that's not my current reality. My current reality is that I have a good, stable job that provides for my family. I'm proud to be able to do that. I am, in fact, infinitely grateful to be doing so, but I also do a lot of other things. I rock my daughter to sleep. I cook dinner for my wife. I volunteer at my church. I help throw a pretty awesome queer dance party once a month. I consistently almost finish pretty intricate knitting projects. It's very true. There's a big basket. There's a lot going on over here, a lot that I'm proud of, a lot that comes before the descriptor that my job offers. So the next time I'm asked the question that has always made me seize up just a little bit, because come on, do you really care about how I make money? I'm gonna answer, for work, I'm in communications. And then I'm gonna change the subject. We all contain multitudes, don't we? So let's just give ourselves permission to know that, even when the world tries to define us otherwise.
I'd like to invite you to sing with me. In the turquoise hymnal, it's number 1011. I learned this song in a song circle, sitting on the floor with 5 remarkable people. And I learned different words that are in our hymnal, and so I revert to them all the time. And you might have learned this song in your own hearts, in your own lives. I'm going to invite you to sing it the way that you sing it. When we sing together, we don't all have to sing the same words. Return again, number 1011 in the hymnal, or you can sing from your heart.
As we enter into our time of meditation today, I'll ask you to take a deep breath. Finding yourself grounded in your seat, in this space, with these people. Now I invite you to focus in on the work, either paid or unpaid, that takes up the majority of your working time. What are the things about that work that you enjoy? What moments within it make you feel the most satisfied, even fulfilled? Now, broaden your view from the work itself, out to the reason why you pursue it. Is it indeed for fulfillment? Is it because of necessity? Is it to provide for yourself, for your family, your community, a combination? What parts of your work, small or large, connect you to yourself, to your values, your passion, to recognizing your unique skills? What are areas outside your life that benefit from your work? Your relationships, your family, hobbies, goals. What does your work feed? What does it sustain? What does it teach you? How does it support the fullness of your life? Maybe so.
Well, this month our theme, it's got 2 words. You might have noticed it somewhere on like the order of service in the newsletter. The theme is calling and vocation. And as we've been exploring that this month, I think that I'm seeing that they're really different things, and I want to unpack that today. And we want to unpack how the word job is not either calling or vocation necessarily. So I started to understand that when I went on a sabbatical it was my first sabbatical. It was in the mid-1990s, and I was started out in a small church. I was the only staff person, and that next 7 years it had grown very quickly, and all of a sudden I had staff to manage, and I didn't know how to do it. They do not teach you in seminary how to do any administrative work or management at all, and so I actually arranged to do a management training internship, of all places, Lucent Bell Laboratory. It just happened, one of my friends was in management training there, and so we worked out this thing. It was half the country away, and so we worked out this thing where I go there 1 week every month. And because being paid as a relatively new minister, I didn't have enough money to fly out there every month. They paid me for 1 day every week to do clinical verbatims. When you're learning to do clinical work, you learn to be able to write word for word what you observed, and so you can reflect on it. And so I did that, kind of, I guess, like being a clerk in a trial. I did that 1 day a week for the management team so they could use that for their evaluation feedback process. And one reason I wanted to do it and to go so far away from home was that my 20-year-old son was living in New York City, and I was very worried about him. And this was near New York City, so I got to see him once a month for a weekend. All right, so here is, I walk into this place. I'd never been in a big, giant corporate setting before. Most people working there were engineers or scientists. I mean, there were some brilliant scientists at Bell Labs. And they all had signed up to that job for life. It was the culture in the 1990s. So let's say they started working in the 70s. They thought, for decades, anybody who started working there was there for their whole career. But in the 90s, things were changing. Lucent Bell Labs was breaking up into different companies, and people were getting fired. And they had never, laid off. They didn't call it fired. They were laid off. And they had never, ever, ever imagined this would happen to them. And the management team was observing some disturbing things. First, they noticed that some of the people who were laid off, and of course, people were friends, so they kept talking to each other. Many of them were having heart attacks and strokes within weeks after they were laid off, and many weren't, but it was disturbing how many were. And then they noticed a lot of the people who were there, because they never knew who was next, were very stressed, and their health was deteriorating as well. And so as they did their management training, they started to go deeply with people, trying to find out why some people were having health problems, and if there was anything in management they could do to help allay that. Now, this is not a scientific study at all, but what they started to notice was the people who were healthy still while they were working and as they left were people that did not identify their being, the deepest meaning in their life, with their job. They had things, yes, most of them loved their job, but they had other things that were important to them that gave meaning to their life. It kind of sounds obvious now to us. They either were very involved with their family. I mean, many of them had families, but not all of them found meaning in family life, but many of them did. They found, let's say, they were, things like they ran their neighborhood softball league for their kids. Or they were very involved in volunteer work that gave them a lot of meaning. Many of them were involved in things like Rotary and Lions Club or their different congregations that they belonged to. Those people who had a deep understanding of themselves and what was meaningful to them in their lives were still healthy. Those that equated their work with meaning were not. He was trying to be a rock and roll star. He was in the city. He was couch surfing. He worked under the table, 100% cash at a very sketchy Mexican restaurant run by Chinese people, immigrants. And what worried me the most, well, first thing was he's a terrible musician. That did worry me. And it was kind of hard to say. But the other thing that worried me is he had no ID on him ever. He didn't drive. He had nothing. And I was really afraid he'd get run over by a truck and I would never hear about it. But as I spent time with him, I had this incredible realization. He knew who he was and what was important to him. He listened to his inner voice more than anyone that I met, almost anyone that I met at Lucent Bell Labs. There were a couple of the scientists that they were very self-aware, but he was so self-aware, and he reflected and integrated all of his experiences. And he found out in that time what his real call was. His real call was he was the guy that kept the band together. Right? What does that mean? That means you're good with people. He was the guy that could advertise the band and get people there. What does that mean? He was good at communication out into the world. And that's what he does in the corporate world. But it's a very different corporate world because now no one expects to be there forever, right? Matter of fact, young people here and my son tell me they expect a good job is a job that teaches you how to do the next job that doesn't exist yet. Okay? Very different. You're expecting to move on. Okay? So what I started to understand from this is that call is that inner return to your soul that we were singing. It is that understanding of what has meaning in your life from the inside out. Vocation is those things out in the world that you can do that are connected to that call. And sometimes that's your job, and sometimes it's not, right? Sometimes pieces of it. I always say, my job is wonderful. It was a true call. But there's some parts of my job I really hate doing, and I always say, well, that's why that you pay me, right? Now, we live in a culture that glorifies work for money. Any of you who have ever stayed home to take care of the children, male or female, or stayed home to care for an elder in your household or someone who's ill, knows how little that is valued, working without money. And those people work very, very hard, right? So what I realized, I was just reading, it said it better than I could say it. I was reading my Harvard alumni magazine, and there was this young man who was from Africa. His name is Tawanda Muala, and I want to read you what he writes. Coming from another culture, seeing our culture, and I want you to place the word Harvard because I went there, and it's just part of the American culture. I want you to replace it with the culture that we live in. He says, for me, the difficult thing about coming to Harvard is that I was raised to be a Botswana man. My culture tells me that the greatest thing you can ever do is to care for your family. But here, there's the deep, dark thing that happens when you grab a bunch of young, ambitious, and nervous people, or old, ambitious, and nervous people, in a place like this. People end up not really caring about one another. The fact that it is so cliche to say this implies the embarrassing plainness of truth. We'll pick a work deadline over a friend. We'll find soft, smart ways of screwing people out of the leadership position that might get us a high-profile job after graduation. We'll pick who we think is worth talking to based on what they do and the people they hang around with. This is the simple story of Harvard, or how we're taught to think about being successful and having jobs. The larger story includes the innumerable things I am happy and grateful for, but the simple story remains at the center. The simple story is being African is that we are taught to care for each other. So I just think it points out that there are different cultural values placed on the work that we do, and that many of you, I know, value, even if you love your job, you value other things. You value the relationships that you have at that job. You value the relationships you have with your family or your friends. You value relationships. And that relationships are work. They may be, for some of you, your vocation. They may be your vocation, that which gives meaning to your life. And so, because of that, we thought it was a good time to have this topic today as we do Tashlich. Because the whole story of Rosh Hashanah moving to Yom Kippur is that this Jewish New Year is the time for us to review our relationships, to look inside and see if we ourselves need to do some work on them. In other words, that work may be your call at this time of the year. So every year, inspired by traditional Jewish folk custom, we practice a ritual of restoration known as Tashlich, meaning the casting away, the throwing away. I invite you to hold a stone to represent. Now, raise your hand if you don't have a stone and would like one, because I think we have people that will help you have one. I'm going to go, if our ushers could come over here, I'll go over here. Okay, could you just pass these around the choir? Because it looks like half the choir would like one. Okay. As we're passing these out, let me tell you what I'd like you to do with them. I would like you to hold a stone to represent something you did in the past year that you would like to transform. Does this stone represent a strained relationship that you would like to ease? A broken relationship you would like to mend? A betrayal of your own sense of vocation that you need to examine? A personal need that you are afraid to ask for help for? Can you hold it in one hand, feel its true weight, and refrain from beating yourself or another up with it? You notice I took very small stones, so I don't hurt anybody. Can you accept it and weep? Can you see that it is only part of who you are? For you contain multitudes. You are the need and the help, the broken and the builder, the caller and the called, the giver and the receiver, the mindless actor and the thoughtful doer. We are all the transformers and the transformed. You can offer this stone to the waters of transformation symbolized here. What can you do to enter those waters? For instance, you may want to restore a relationship, ask for forgiveness, right a wrong, make restitution, do penance, forgive yourself, or offer forgiveness to another. I invite you to make a promise to yourself to fulfill that action before Yom Kippur, which is the last day of the Jewish New Year, which ends at sunset this Wednesday. You can seal that promise by casting the stone in the water. You're invited to cast the stone here if you'd like by coming forward and placing the stone in this bowl. Or you may want to take that stone home so you have more time for reflection. When you are ready, take the stone down to a lake or a river, cast it away, promising to begin again with a vision of yourself, more honest, more loving, more whole, and more holy. I invite you to come forward for the casting away, that Tashlich. for so many acts, both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of separateness. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin
You'll find the words to the chalice extinguishing at the bottom of the order of service. Please join me. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
I'd like to close with these words by Carl Sandburg. Let the love of this hour go on. Let all the oaths and children and people of this love be clean as a washstone under a waterfall in the sun. This service is over. Let our service begin again, renewed.